Thanks for that. You know, a few days ago, before coming here, I was talking to my peers and I was saying, this is an important talk. Shall I use slides? Shall I use images? And their response was, Taz, you're a natural storyteller. You need to paint the pictures with your words, with your emotions, with your presence. So that's what I'm going to do for you today. I'm hoping I'm going to take you on a story that will take you back in time to some of my story and then maybe into the future to some of your stories. I'm hoping that I'm going to leave you in the present even, feeling a little bit more determination, a little bit more inspiration, and just knowing that you're going to do something awesome with your life. So, every good story begins with a slow build, doesn't it? So I'm going to start with something really mundane. Are you ready for this? Brace yourselves. I'm going to talk to you about ceiling tiles. You weren't supposed to laugh at that bit, but maybe you won't laugh at the bits that are supposed to be funny later on, so that's okay. I want to talk to you specifically about polystyrene ceiling tiles. You know, if you stare at polystyrene ceiling tiles, you can see all kinds of amazing images and pictures and displays in them. 9 hours is about the right amount of time to do that. You can see all kinds of pictures in polystyrene ceiling tiles after 9 hours. How do I know that? I know that because 9 hours is precisely the amount of time I lay on a flatbed with my head packed in sandbags, staring at the ceiling tiles in A&E, with no real choice to do anything other than find those pictures. Because anything else would have meant thinking about why I was there. And I absolutely didn't want to think about why I was there. You see, that morning, as had become the norm, I'd made a pact. I'd had my usual conversation with whatever god or gods were out there. I'd prayed, I'd asked, and for whatever reason they had not given me the painless terminal illness I'd been praying for. So we'd made the same pact that we'd been making every day for months now. That would go out, and I would take as many risks as I could possibly take. And if, at the end of that day, I was still alive, somebody wanted me to be here. So, I got in my car, I was driving to work, and as I approached the brow of the hill, on the wrong side of the road, music blaring, I hit a moment of bliss as I saw the other car approaching. This is it. Thank you. I'm getting out. But that moment faded really, really quickly when I realised that it didn't matter how much I didn't want to be alive. It didn't matter how much I was terrified of going home that night. I couldn't take anybody else down because of my death wish. Hurtling through the air quite quickly, everything really does slow down. I'm thankful to the tree that broke my flight at the bottom of about a 6-foot ditch. Fast forward to that hospital bed. The second you hear people say something along the lines of spinal damage, everything changes. Everything changed for me in that moment. You see, I hadn't told anybody about the abuse I was going through at home. I hadn't told anybody about the extent of the domestic abuse I was going through. I hadn't told anybody about the depression I was going through. I hadn't told anybody how much of myself I was losing, how much of myself I'd already lost. I hadn't told anyone how desperately I wanted to do anything to avoid walking back through that door every night. But in that moment, when you see men in white coats and you hear them having lain there for 9 hours in pretty much suspension, you hear words spinal damage, and believe me, the first words that go through your mind are, I'm going to be paralysed. You idiot, Taz. You've tried to escape, you've tried everything to get out, and now look at you. You've now written your car off, so you've got no way to get out. And if you're paralysed, then what? You're even more trapped than ever. So that was one of those choice moments, and in that moment, the hopelessness I had been feeling up to that point suddenly turned into hope, and I realised that I could sink even further, or I could do something. Ever had one of those moments where you think, hold on, this stuff might have happened to me for a reason? Maybe. What if all of this stuff I've been going through is so that I can help other people with it? What if I can change other people's lives? What if I can talk to people about that grey area of abuse that I was in? What if I can help people show that there's a way out? Help people believe that? And that's when I changed. But the story doesn't end there. Let me fast forward about 8 or 9 years ahead. I'd escaped from that relationship. I'd pretty much pressed the reset button on life. You know, we don't very often get the chance to do that. There's no obvious big button we can just press and go back to the beginning, but somehow I had managed to reset everything. Yeah, I'd had another couple of suicidal blips, but I'd got past that. I had a new job. I'd moved to a different part of the country. I was now, and I'm waiting for a gasp on this point, just so you know. Even if you're watching at home, I want a gasp for this bit. I was now UK director for what at the time was one of the world's biggest multinational publishing companies. Thank you very much. I had a wonderful new partner. I had the posh car. I had the bonus checks. I had the holidays. But still I wasn't happy. Why wasn't I happy? On paper, everything was just amazing. But I realised that I still wasn't filled up. I realised that something had to give. And I started out on this programme of learning all these different amazing, life-enhancing personal development techniques in my spare time. Spare time for anyone who's been at that level in corporate. So I trained in NLP, I trained in coaching, I trained in mentoring, I trained in all those corporate conflict management things. I even trained in some of the more woo-woo aspects of life. I spent about 10 years learning from shamans and medicine people. And I got it, and I realised that what really filled me up was helping other people. Remember that promise I made back in the day? But I still wasn't doing it. It took a series of really, really tough life challenges to get to the point where I did something about it. Yet again, I ignored all the little bits of gravel and all the stones, and I waited for the boulders to hit. It took me hitting a breakdown to do something about it. That breakdown turned into my breakthrough. It absolutely did. It was the best thing that could have happened because it broke me open so far that all the stuff I'd been holding on to just flowed out, and I was able to rebuild myself in the shape I am now. There's that reset button again. But so many of us do this every day. We trundle on through life being unhappy and doing nothing about it. So this is where I want to talk about stories. I want to talk about your story, you know? And I also want to just talk about the personal development movement. Now, you know, there's a bit of a backlash going on at the moment. I see it all the time. I see it from some of my peers. There's this big backlash against people who are successful. I don't know if it's just in the UK, but we love to bring people down when they've made it, don't we? And I want to buck that trend a little bit. I want to buck that trend, particularly when it comes to people who've made a career in helping other people. If I had 50p for everyone who's dissed somebody saying, take massive action, I'd be far richer than I am now. So I'm going to buck that trend right now, and I'm going to tell you that you do need to take massive action. But there's a caveat, and this is what they don't tell you. Massive action is going to be different for every one of you here. So go back to some of my story for a moment. That massive action, whether it was the universe intervening or whether I was just driving like an idiot, think the latter. That massive action was thinking that I might be paralysed. It took something that big to make me make that change. The next piece of massive action was that breakdown that turned into my breakthrough. But I want to tell you that if any of you here are unhappy, if any of you here are not doing that thing that you're meant to be doing, You've all had that feeling. Raise your hand if you've had that feeling, that weird thing when you know something's going really right and it kind of feels like your eyes are glowing from the inside out. Who's had that feeling? Yeah, we all have. Your massive action doesn't have to be as big as breaking your back. It doesn't have to be having a breakdown. My massive action was getting out. My massive action was getting out of that abusive relationship. My massive action was getting out of the career that didn't fit. My massive action was taking that massive leap of faith and going into a career that I had no previous experience of. I just had this gut feeling and a desire and a drive to do something to help other people. My massive action was writing some of my experiences down in my books in black and white, and let me tell you, that's terrifying, because it's one thing talking to an audience where I can gauge your reactions, and it's another thing putting your story out there and having no idea how that's going to be received. My massive action is telling my story to you now, in the hope that it might give you some inspiration to change your life. To one of the ladies who comes on to some of my empowerment events, she had been locked in a room for years, kept drugged and horrendously abused. By the time she got out of that relationship, she was severely agoraphobic. Because of the drugs she'd been force-fed, she was addicted to substances and therefore lost her kids. Massive action for her was getting her care assistant to drop her right at the door of the empowerment event I was running with our local domestic abuse support team, and coming in. That agoraphobic lady walked into that room. Her massive action was by lunchtime of that day, walking into town to get a sandwich. Her massive action was getting clean. Her massive action was being able to take her son to see Spider-Man. Her massive action was going dress shopping with her daughter. Her massive action was getting her kids back. To the actress I've coached, her massive action was finding the courage to say to her agent, "You're not getting me the roles I need to find someone else." To the therapist I've been coaching, the massive action for her was completely changing her brand and being more aligned to who she was and attracting the clients that she wanted to work with, rather than wearing the suit and the twin set and pearls and being who she thought she had to be. So what's your massive action going to be? And I want you to just be aware that you should never ever wait for defining moments in your life, because you have no idea that a moment is a defining moment until after it has happened. And when those moments happen, when you know that thing that just happened, that's a pivotal moment, don't be humble in that moment. Leave your humility for later. In that moment, you be proud, you reach high and you put your hand over your back and you give yourself a pat. Because in that moment, you know that whatever it was, how large, how small, whatever it is to you, you survived it, you did it, and you're going to make change from it. So you be proud and you absolutely grab that moment. If I go back to before I escaped from corporate, I knew I had potential. I was tired of having potential. I wanted mine now. At the end of my life, I don't want my headstone to say, had potential. I don't want my obituary to say, she had potential. The first story people hear about you when you're no longer on this earth. Don't have potential. When is your now going to be? I chose to turn my potential into my now. I chose to use the difficult times and turn them into gold to help other people. I chose to leap. So don't wait for the defining moments. And don't keep waiting for that epiphany. What if this is it? What if this is your epiphany? Let it be now. Let this be your epiphany. Whatever your story's going to be, make it a good one. Thank you.